Emily never should have gone to the park that night. But she needed air. Her whole day had been a disaster. Her boss chewed her out, her car almost got towed, and she spilled coffee all over her only clean sweater. By the time she got home, she felt like she was going to suffocate. She needed to clear her head. So she grabbed her hoodie, threw on her sneakers, and left. Greenwood Park was almost deserted. The rain from earlier had left the pavement damp, the streetlights reflecting off puddles along the path. Bare trees lined both sides, their branches twisting into the sky. The air was cold, still heavy with the smell of wet earth. Emily tugged her hood up and walked, her footsteps soft against the pavement. For the first time all day, she felt like she could breathe. She didn't even listen to music. Just let the quiet settle over her. For a while it helped, until she noticed something strange. The feeling, like the silence had changed, like she wasn't alone. She slowed her pace, listening. The wind stirred the trees, rustling damp leaves. A distant car rumbled down a nearby street. Nothing else. But still something felt off. She glanced over her shoulder. The path behind her was empty. Still, her gut told her to move. She picked up her pace, heading toward the far exit, toward the street, the lights, the city. Then, a footstep. Behind her. Soft. Deliberate. Emily froze. The sound stopped. Her pulse spiked. She swallowed, forcing herself to turn around. Nothing. The path stretched behind her, empty as before. Her skin prickled. Maybe it was just her imagination. Maybe she was just on edge from her shitty day. She exhaled and kept walking. Faster this time. But after a few steps, she heard it again. A single footstep. Then another. Closer. Emily's chest tightened. She turned her head just a little, and for the first time she saw him. A man. Tall. Dressed in dark clothes. Standing just beyond the nearest street lamp. Half shrouded in shadows. Watching her. Her stomach twisted. She forced herself to keep moving. Don't run. Don't panic. She wasn't some helpless victim in a horror movie. It was probably nothing. Just a guy heading home. Probably. Her hands curled into fists. If he followed her, she'd deal with it. Then, he moved. Not toward her, but closer to the tree line. Slipping deeper into the shadows. Emily's blood ran cold. He was hiding. Not leaving. Not walking past her. He was waiting. Waiting for what? The thought made her legs move faster. The path split ahead. Left led deeper into the park. Right led to the street. Emily took a sharp right. The exit wasn't far. If she could just... Another sound. Not footsteps. Breathing. Behind her. Too close. She spun around. And he was there. 10 feet away. Too close to be an accident. She got a better look at him now. And the worst part? He wasn't wearing a mask. He wasn't trying to hide. Because he wanted her to see him. And he was smiling. A slow, deliberate grin. Emily's stomach dropped. That smile. It wasn't just amusement. It was certainty. Like he already knew exactly how this was going to end. She turned and ran. Emily's feet slammed against the pavement as she sprinted toward the street. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. The world blurred around her. Trees, lamplights, puddles flashing by in streaks of color. But she wasn't thinking about any of it. She was thinking about him. About the smile he had given her. That horrible, slow grin that said, "Run if you want. It won't matter." She forced herself to go faster. Her sneakers pounded against the wet ground, water splashing up her legs. The street was so close. Just a little more. Then, footsteps. Not hers. His. Heavy. Fast. Closing in. Emily's chest seized with terror. She didn't dare look back. Didn't want to see how close he was. Didn't want to see his face again. But she could feel him. Right there. Coming for her. She pushed herself harder. Lungs burning. And then, she slipped. Her foot hit a deep puddle. Her ankle twisted. And suddenly, she was falling. The pavement rushed up to meet her. She crashed onto the wet ground. Pain exploding through her hands and knees. Her breath hitched. She tried to get up. But before she could, something snatched her hood. and yanked her back. Emily screamed. Her back hit the ground hard, knocking the breath from her lungs. She kicked out, twisting, scrambling, fighting. But he was on her. A heavy weight pinned her down. She looked up and saw his face. Up close, in the dim glow of the streetlight. He wasn't angry. He wasn't rushed. He was calm, like he'd done this before, like he knew exactly what he was doing. Emily thrashed, twisting her body, trying to break free, but he was too strong. His knee pressed into her stomach, his hands gripping her arms. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. Then, he leaned in, so close she could feel his breath against her cheek. And in a voice so soft, so casual, he whispered, "You run fast." Emily's blood ran cold. A sob caught in her throat. She wasn't just a random target. This wasn't random at all. He had been watching her, waiting for her, and now, he had her. Emily couldn't move. His full weight was on top of her, pressing her into the cold, wet pavement. Her lungs burned, fighting for air. She kicked hard, her knee slamming into his side. But he barely reacted. Like it was nothing. Like she was nothing. The street lamp flickered above them. The only sound her ragged breathing and the steady drip of water from the trees. Then, he pressed a hand over her mouth. Emily's body jerked. Her scream was muffled, swallowed by his palm. The dampness of his skin, the roughness of his grip. It was real. Too real. She twisted, bucking against him, trying to bite his fingers, claw at his face. Anything. But his grip tightened. She could barely breathe. His other hand closed around her throat. Not squeezing. Not yet. Just holding her there. Like a warning. Like he was telling her, "It's over." Emily's mind screamed. Her body was trapped, but her brain raced. This was it. This was really happening. Her vision blurred. Her muscles burned, screaming for oxygen. The weight on her chest made her lightheaded. She tried to focus. Think. If she passed out, it was over. She had to keep fighting. She forced herself to go still, to stop thrashing, to make him think she had given up. The man watched her. Even in the dim light, she could see the glint in his eyes, studying her, enjoying this. His grip on her throat loosened slightly. Not much, just enough. He leaned in closer, his breath hot against her skin. "You're smart," he murmured. "But not smart enough." His fingers dug into her jaw. His weight shifted just slightly, and that was all she needed. Emily snapped her head forward and smashed her forehead into his nose. A sickening crunch. The man grunted, jerking back. Blood spattered onto her cheek. His grip loosened completely. Emily shoved him off with everything she had, scrambling backward on her hands and knees. Her chest heaved. She gasped for air, vision spinning. The man clutched his face, blood dripping between his fingers. Then, he laughed. Low, soft, like this was all just a game. Emily's stomach lurched. She turned and ran. Not toward the street. Not toward the exit. She knew now he had planned for that. She could hear it in his voice. She had been walking into a trap. So she ran deeper into the park. Into the darkness. She didn't know where she was going. Didn't care. All that mattered was getting away. Her legs burned. Her hands still stinging from where they had scraped against the pavement. Branches whipped against her face, slicing across her skin. The trees closed in around her, the park turning into a maze. But she didn't stop. Didn't dare look back. She could still hear him. Still hear that low, amused chuckle. Like he knew something she didn't. Like he was just letting her run. Letting her think she had a chance. She reached a clearing. Wide open. The old picnic area. Benches lined the edges. The rusted metal trash cans tipped over from the wind. She scanned the area, chest heaving. No one. No people. No cars. No way out. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She had to think. Had to. Then, a noise. A single footstep. Emily whipped around. And he was there, standing at the edge of the clearing. Blood smeared across his face. That smile still stretching his lips. "You run fast," he said again. His voice was calm, almost impressed. He took a slow step forward. Then another. Emily's breath came in short, panicked gasps. He was blocking her way back. If she ran, he'd be on her in seconds. She was trapped. Her eyes darted around, looking for anything. A weapon. A way out. Something. The trash cans. The old benches. Her pulse pounded. And then she saw it. A broken glass bottle near the picnic tables. Shattered. The edges sharp. She forced herself to breathe. Forced herself to move slow. Not to let him see. She took a small step back. Another. His smile widened. He was enjoying this. Like he wanted her to run again. Like he was waiting for it. Emily's hand closed around the glass. The sharp edge bit into her palm. She barely felt it. The man tilted his head. He could see the fear in her eyes. He thought he had already won. Then, Emily lunged and slashed. The bottle ripped through his arm. A deep, wet tear. Blood sprayed onto the pavement. The man stumbled back. For the first time, his face twisted in surprise. Emily didn't wait. She grabbed the nearest trash can and hurled it at him. It wasn't heavy, but it was enough. He raised his arms to block it, cursing. And Emily ran. For real this time. No more looking back. No more hesitation. She ran like her life depended on it. Because it did. The trees blurred past her. Her feet barely touched the ground. She could still hear him behind her. Pissed now, stumbling, chasing. But she had a head start. She reached the path. Kept running. Streetlights. Pavement. The sound of cars. She bolted across the grass. And burst onto the street. Headlights. A car screeched to a stop. The driver honked, yelling something. Emily didn't hear. She just kept running. Didn't stop until she was blocks away. Didn't stop until her body collapsed against a wall. Legs giving out. Her hands were still shaking. Her face still wet with sweat, with blood. Her chest still heaving. But she was alive. She made it. She survived. And somewhere deep in the park, a man stood alone, holding his bleeding arm, and smiling. Emily didn't stop running, even after she reached the city streets. After the headlights blinded her and a driver slammed on the brakes, yelling. She kept going. Her legs were numb. Her lungs felt torn apart. But she didn't stop. Not until she was far from Greenwood Park. Not until she saw people again. Not until she couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. She stumbled into a gas station, chest heaving. The cashier, a tired-looking guy with headphones in, barely glanced up from his phone. Emily gripped the edge of the counter, trying to force out words. She needed to say something, ask for help. But nothing came out. Her voice was gone. Her hands trembled. Her hoodie was streaked with dirt and blood. His blood, her scraped-up knees were already swelling. She looked insane. And the worst part? No one noticed. The city kept moving. People walked past outside. Car honked. Phone rang. Like the world hadn't just tried to kill her. Like he hadn't just tried to kill her. Emily dug her nails into her palms, willing herself to breathe. She was safe now. Wasn't she? Her apartment was only a few blocks away. She told herself she could make it. That she didn't need help. That if she could just lock the door behind her, this would be over. So she left the gas station. Her fingers curled into fists as she walked, forcing herself to look normal. Not like someone who had just been attacked. Not like someone who could still feel his breath on her skin. But as she walked, something felt off. Not wrong. Not like before. Just off. Like something had been left unfinished. Like something was still waiting. She told herself it was paranoia. That she was just jumpy. That she was alone now. Then she saw the first Polaroid. It was on the sidewalk. Just sitting there, inches from her foot. A small white square. Face down. She slowed. Her stomach twisted. The whole world felt like it had gone silent. She shouldn't pick it up. She should keep walking. But her body didn't listen. Her fingers shook as she reached down, flipping it over. And the moment she saw it, her heart stopped. It was a photo of her. From just minutes ago. Her. Inside the gas station. Leaning against the counter, gripping the edge. A little blurry, like it had been taken quickly. Like someone had just snapped it and walked away. Emily's breath came in short, sharp bursts. She looked around, panic spiking. The streets weren't empty. People walked past, talking, laughing. Normal. Too normal. She scanned their faces, her pulse pounding. Was he here? Was he watching her right now? Her fingers crushed the Polaroid. She turned and ran. She reached her apartment in record time. She slammed the door shut, locked it. Deadbolt. Chain. Her hands were still shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She backed away from the door, gasping for breath. The room was silent. Her own reflection stared back at her from the dark TV screen. She felt watched. Even here. She grabbed the nearest chair, wedged it under the doorknob. Then she checked the windows. Locked. Curtains shut. Her apartment was small, just a kitchen, a tiny living room, a bathroom, a bedroom. No one could be inside. She was alone. She was safe. So why did she feel like she was trapped? Her phone buzzed. She nearly jumped out of her skin. She fumbled with it, fingers slick with sweat. A new text. Unknown number. Her stomach plummeted. Slowly, she opened it. Forgot something? A second message. An image. It loaded slowly, pixel by pixel. And when it appeared, Emily's lungs locked. It was another Polaroid. This time of her apartment door. Taken from outside. Emily's body moved before her brain caught up. She ran to the peephole, heart hammering. Pressed her eye against the glass. The hallway was empty. But she knew. She knew. He had been here. Maybe seconds ago. Maybe he was still close. Maybe he was just waiting. Her vision blurred. She stepped away from the door, her whole body rigid with terror. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. She didn't want to see it. Didn't want to know. But she had to. She looked. One word. Soon. Emily stood in the middle of her apartment. Trapped. Her own breath was too loud. Her heartbeat too fast. Outside, the city kept moving. People kept talking, laughing, living. And Emily was alone. Waiting. For the next knock at the door. For the next photo. For the moment she'd wake up and realize she had never really escaped at all. Emily's hands shook as she put her phone down. The room felt wrong. Like she wasn't really alone. Like something had already gotten in. She checked the door again. Still locked. Chair still jammed under the handle. But it didn't matter. Locks didn't matter. Because he wasn't going to wait outside forever. He was coming in. Her brain screamed at her to do something. Call the police. Call anyone. But her body wouldn't move. She just stood there, frozen, staring at the last message. Soon, the word crawled under her skin. Like it meant more than just a threat. Like it was a promise. Then, a sound. Not a knock. Not the buzz of another text. Something inside the apartment. A slow, quiet creak. Like a footstep. Emily's blood went cold. She wasn't alone. She could feel it now. The same way she'd felt it in the park. That deep, suffocating presence. Like the air itself had changed. Like she had already lost. Her fingers clenched into fists. She turned her head slow, shaking, toward the bedroom. The door was open. She hadn't left it open. A cold wave of nausea crashed through her. Had she locked the front door fast enough? Had she even been alone when she got inside? Her breath came too fast. She tried to listen, tried to hear him. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator. The distant sound of traffic outside. But the feeling was there. Thick, heavy, like he was already watching her. She moved. Not toward the bedroom. Not toward the door. She backed up, slowly into the kitchen. Her foot hit the fridge. She reached behind her, fingers searching. A drawer. Silverware. She yanked it open, grabbed the biggest knife she could find. It wasn't much, but it was something. She tightened her grip, her pulse slamming in her ears. And then, a sound from the bedroom. A slow, dragging breath. Low. Close. Emily's stomach dropped. She turned ready to run. But the lights went out. Her breath caught. The entire apartment plunged into darkness. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The streetlight glow barely touched the edges of the walls. Emily stood paralyzed, gripping the knife so tight her hand ached. Her own breath felt too loud. Then, something moved. A shadow in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. And then she knew. He was here, in the same room, watching her. Her chest locked. She couldn't see him. Couldn't tell how close he was. Couldn't tell if he was reaching for her right now. The air felt thick, pressing against her skin. Her legs screamed at her to run. But where? The door was too far. If she made a sound, if she even breathed too loud, he'd catch her. And this time she wouldn't get away. Her fingers tightened around the knife. She had one chance. One. She had to strike first. She moved. Fast. Desperate. She lashed out into the dark, swinging the knife with everything she had. Her breath came in ragged, shaking gasps. Nothing. She slashed again, and hit something. A body. Warm. Solid. A sharp gasp. Then, a hand closed around her wrist. Too strong. Her stomach lurched. The knife was ripped from her hand. Something slammed into her chest hard. She stumbled back, hitting the counter. Pain exploded through her ribs. She gasped, and he grabbed her. Fingers locked around her throat. Not choking. Not yet. Just holding her still. Like he wanted her to feel it. Feel how helpless she was. How easy this was for him. Emily's pulse pounded. A rush of cold terror overtook her. This was it. This was the moment. No running. No escaping. This was where it ended. Then, his breath against her ear. Low. Amused. Not bad. Her stomach twisted. You fight harder than the others. The others. Emily's brain snapped. She thought about the missing girls. The news stories. The rumors. He had done this before. And now, it was her turn. No, no, no. Her body reacted before her mind did. Her hand shot out, grabbing the only thing within reach. A glass mug from the counter. She swung wildly. The heavy glass smashed into his face. A deep, wet crack. He grunted, his grip loosening. She didn't wait. She tore away, screaming, clawing at the counter for anything to throw, to hit him with, but he was already moving, recovering too fast. Emily lunged for the door. Her fingers fumbled with the locks. The chain. Why wouldn't it move? Then, a hand grabbed her shoulder. She screamed, and threw her whole body forward. The chain snapped. The door ripped open, and Emily fell into the hallway. Light. Voices. Footsteps from the apartments next door. Emily scrambled up, half sobbing. She turned back, heart slamming, but the apartment was empty. He was gone. No trace. No sound. Nothing. Like he had never been there. The police didn't believe her. No sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. No security footage showed anyone else entering the building. They called it a break-in attempt. Maybe even a stress reaction. But Emily knew. He had been real. And he had let her go. Because the next time, he wanted her to see it coming.